Tonight we are looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. In Slovenia, a broken arm meets a river climbing a ladder. In Wales, a rope comes down that nobody can put back. And on the Nullarbor, a diver's cylinder is not where he left it. As always, viewer discretion is advised. This is Cavern Depths. The first story begins now, and it starts the way they all do, with a plan. On June 14th, 2026, Nika Zupan walked down into Škocjan, the deepest underground river canyon in Europe, where the Reka runs 140 meters below the roof. In a wet autumn, that river can flood 4 meters in an hour. The river is the whole cave. It carved it, and it still owns it. Her call-out time was 8 hours out. What does a river cave ask of you that a dry one never does? Attention, mostly, and the discipline to keep looking upstream. Nika was 33, a guide on the show route for 9 seasons, who promised her mother she would always leave a note on the dashboard. Blas was 38, a Divača club caver, the one who read the weather 3 valleys away before anybody laced a boot. His habit was the upstream check. Read the gauge at the Reka bridge before every trip, every time, because a river cave is a forecast you can walk into. The canyon would swallow a cathedral twice over, on iron 45 meters above the water. The plan was the wild section below the tourist route, 2 kilometers downstream, 1 fixed ladder at the far end, 6 hours door to door. What she didn't know, a storm had been sitting on the Snezhnik Plateau since midnight, 40 kilometers upstream, and the Reka was already carrying it. They went under at 9. The first hours ran like every good trip, boots ringing on the iron walkway, the river hissing steady below them, drips ticking off helmets, the rope creaking as they dropped off the hand line. At the second bridge, 2 hours in and on schedule, Blas turned back with a migraine. What they didn't know, the flowstone she would step on carried a film of fresh silt, laid down by water that had already come up once that morning. Stepping down off the ledge, that is when the trip failed her, because the silt let go under her boot and put her whole weight onto her right hand, and her forearm broke against the rock with a sound she felt more than heard. She sat down in 6 inches of water and held the arm to her chest. She now had 1 hand for 2 kilometers of river. Getting to her feet cost 10 minutes. Here is what you need to understand about a river cave. The injury almost never decides it. The upstream weather does. You can walk out with a broken arm at your own pace, and this is where the arithmetic stops being about her body and starts being about the sky. So what does a flood take from you first? Not the passage. The exits. It drowns the low ladders and the crawls long before it fills the canyon you are standing in. Her headlamp had already dropped to reserve, and the crawl she had come through would be gone inside 20 minutes. By 2 o'clock, the pool at the ledge was thigh deep. Panic sat down beside her. The arm had failed. The water rose. The way back was gone. Because this is the arithmetic of a flood pulse. The Reka gains 4 meters in an hour. The ladder at the downstream end is 9 meters tall, and the rungs were going under at 1 a minute. Her upstream hand line went under at 20 past 2. 6 minutes later, the ledge she had fallen from was gone, and the canyon noise changed from a hiss to a roar she could feel in the iron. Watch 9 seasons of guiding turn into 1 clean decision. Nika splinted her own forearm against a tackle bag with tape and a spare glove, one-handed, in 4 minutes, because an arm that swings is an arm that catches. Then she did the hardest arithmetic in caving. She went downstream, toward the water, because the ladder was that way and it was the only door left. Put yourself on that ladder for 1 minute of it. 9 meters of wet iron, 1 working hand, a rung gone every 60 seconds.
and the arithmetic of a river that had taken 3 rungs while she tied the splint. Would you have gone toward the water? She did, and that is the only reason this ends the way it does. She came off the top of the ladder at 3:30 with 4 rungs left. 20 minutes later, and she would have been trapped behind 9 meters of moving river. The Divača team met her at the last bridge. The report recorded a fractured radius on wet flowstone, a splint tied one-handed at 2 kilometers in, and an exit by ladder against a rising river. Blas had called it from the dashboard note at 1 o'clock, 4 hours before anyone would have missed her. The deepest underground river canyon in Europe still carries the Reka under the karst. A river cave is a forecast you can walk into, the club still teaches, so read the sky you cannot see. The report recorded 9 meters of ladder and 1 working arm, and the note is still on her dashboard.
You're watching Cavern Depths, and this is the second story of the night. On May 9th, 2026, Rhiann Morgan clipped into the top pitch of Ogof Ffynnon, the deepest cave in Wales, 300 meters of limestone stacked over 50 kilometers of passage. The rock sits at 7 degrees all year. The cold in there is patient, and it works on you from the first hour. Her call-out time was 12 hours out. What does a through trip ask of you that an out and back never does? Commitment mostly, and a way on you have not seen yet. Rhiann was 29, a South Wales caver of 11 years, who promised her brother she would text him from the car park every single time. Owen was 41, the club's trip secretary, the one who wrote call-out times on the board in marker so nobody could rub them out. His habit was the second rope. Carry 30 meters you do not plan to use every trip, because the way you came in is not always a way out. The main streamway runs 1.5 kilometers of black rock, and the roof in places is 60 meters above your light. The plan was the classic through trip, down 4 pitches, along the streamway, out through the low duck at the far end, 9 hours door to door. What she didn't know: it had rained 40 millimeters on the Black Mountain overnight, and the duck at the far end was already closing. They went down at 8. The early pitches ran like clockwork, descenders hissing on the rope, boots knocking grit into the dark, the stream murmuring somewhere below, drips ticking off their helmets. At the 4th pitch, 3 hours in and on schedule, Rhiann pulled the rope down behind them the way the trip is designed to work. What they didn't know: the tail had flicked into the anchor maillon 60 meters above, and it was not coming back. Pulling the last 2 meters, that is when the trip failed her, because the rope stopped dead against the anchor, and the harder she hauled, the tighter the tail locked into the maillon. They had 60 meters of clean wall above them and no way to climb it. Getting to that conclusion cost 20 minutes. Here is what you need to understand about a through trip. The moment the rope comes down, the cave has only 1 door left. You are not lost, and you are not hurt. You are committed, and this is where the arithmetic stops being about skill and starts being about temperature. So what does a cave take from a healthy caver who cannot move fast? Heat. A body walking makes its own. A body waiting in 7 degrees does not. And Owen's call-out was still 9 hours away. They reached the duck at 1:30 and found 4 inches of airspace where there should have been a foot. Panic came down the passage with the water. The rope had failed. The duck was closing. Nobody knew. Because this is the arithmetic of a wet through trip. A duck closes at about 1 inch an hour on a rising stream. A caver in wet oversuit loses 1 degree an hour standing still, and the far side was 10 meters away. Watch 11 years of caving spend itself on 10 meters. Rhiann went first at 2 o'clock, on her back, nose to the roof, breathing the 4 inches that were left, and she came up on the far side into open passage. Then she did the thing that cost people their lives in this cave. She waited for him in the cold, in wet kit, in a draft, for 2 hours, because you do not leave a partner at a duck. Put yourself on that side of the water for 1 hour of it. No rope behind you, 4 inches of air in front, and your own heat leaving you at 1 degree an hour. and the arithmetic of a body that had stopped shivering before the shout came back. Would you have waited? She did, and that is the part the report could not fault. South and Mid Wales Cave Rescue reached the duck at 11:30 that night, 11 hours after the rope came down, and pulled Rhiannon Morgan out unconscious at 4 a.m. She died in the ambulance on the mountain road, of a cold that had been working on her since the first hour. The inquest recorded a jammed pull-down at 60 meters, 11 hours of exposure at 7 degrees, and death by hypothermia, with no fault found underground. The club rigs that pitch with a retrievable backup now, and the marker board still carries her call-out time. The deepest cave in Wales still runs its 1.5 kilometers of black streamway. The way you came in is not always a way out, Owen still teaches, so carry the rope you will never use. The inquest recorded 60 meters of rope and 11 hours of cold, and her brother never got the text from the car park. You're watching Cavern Depths, and tonight's final story is the one they still talk about. On March 21st, 2026, Dan Whitlock carried his cylinders down into Cocklebiddy, one of the longest underwater cave systems on Earth, 6 kilometers of flooded tunnel under a waterless desert. A twin tank buys you 50 minutes at that depth. Everything past that has to be staged ahead of you. Their surface call-out was 10 hours out. What does a staged dive ask of you that a single push never does? Trust, mostly, in cylinders you left behind in the dark. Dan was 37, a Perth diver with 400 cave dives, who promised his daughter a photo from the surface after every single dive. Priya was 35, a Melbourne engineer on her 4th Nullarbor expedition, the one who wrote every cylinder's pressure on a slate before it went in. Her habit was the double check. Touch each staged tank on the way past, every dive, because gas you have not touched is gas you do not have. Cocklebiddy is 3 long sumps joined by 2 rock beaches, 4 kilometers from daylight. The plan was a survey push into the second sump, 2 staged cylinders on the line at 400 and at 900 meters, 30 meters depth, turn on thirds. What he didn't know, the second stage had been knocked off its clip by another team's line trap 4 days earlier and was lying in silt 8 meters off the guideline. He went under at 7. The first leg ran like a postcard, regulators hissing their steady rhythm, bubbles rolling along the roof, the line humming through curled fingers, his light reaching 40 meters down a tunnel nobody has walked. He touched the first stage at 400 meters, 12 minutes in and on schedule, exactly where he had clipped it. What he didn't know, that was the last cylinder he was going to find. Reaching the 900-meter marker, that is when the dive failed him, because the clip was there on the line and the cylinder was not, and the silt around it held no shape he could read. He hung on the line and checked his gauges twice. He had turned on thirds for a swim that now had no gas waiting in the middle of it. Here is what you need to understand about staged diving. The cylinders are not spare gas. You do not carry the gas to get home without them. And this is where the arithmetic stops being about the diver and starts being about the gauge on his chest. So what do you do when the math says you are already short? You stop swimming. You breathe slowly. You work the numbers once, properly, before you move a fin. He had been down 26 minutes. He had 110 bar at 900 meters of penetration, and a calm diver on double 12s moves about 4 meters on a bar at that depth. Panic pulled at the harness. The stage had failed. The gauge was falling. The silt gave nothing back. Because this is the arithmetic of a missing cylinder. A frightened diver breathes twice what a calm one does. The first stage was 500 meters behind him, and every minute he spent searching cost him 20 meters of the swim home. Watch 400 dives by one decision. Dan gave the search 90 seconds by his watch, no more, sweeping the silt off the line with one hand always on it, then turned for home without it. Then he did the hardest thing in diving. He swam slower than he wanted to, half speed, long, slow breaths, 500 meters to a cylinder he knew was there. Put yourself on that line for 1 minute of it. 900 meters of rock over your head, a gauge you cannot stop watching, and a tank somewhere ahead that has to still be there. And the arithmetic of a man breathing like he is asleep while swimming for his life. Could you slow down? He did, and that is the only reason this story ends the way it does. He reached the first stage at 41 minutes with 30 bar on his back gas, and he breathed that cylinder down to nothing over the last 400 meters. He surfaced on the rock beach into Priya's light with an empty tank, and both hands shook too hard to unclip his own harness. He had come within 4 minutes of being trapped on his own gas plan, and he survived it. The expedition report recorded a staged cylinder displaced by another team's line trap, a 90-second search limit, and an exit on 30 bar. No thrashing, no lost line. Nullarbor teams tag and photograph every stage now. One of the longest underwater cave systems on Earth still runs its 6 kilometers under the desert. Gas you have not touched is gas you do not have, Priya still teaches. And every stage now carries 2 clips. The report recorded 900 meters of penetration and 30 bar at the turn, and Dan sent his daughter the photo from the beach.